Hi, I'm Jim Zogby. My next guest is Shane Aprile. He's editor of Campaigns and Elections magazine, former campaign reporter for the Hill newspaper, and a former senior editor at Politics magazine. Thanks for joining us. Santorum won 2 southern states and is leading in Louisiana, also leading, I would say, in Texas. Does this, not speaking of Santorum, but does this not point out a fundamental weakness in the inevitable, quote-unquote, inevitable Romney candidacy?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, the one thing we've seen throughout the whole primary process is the spots where Mitt Romney is weak and has been weak. He hasn't gained any ground there. You would expect that the argument traditionally is, listen, you know, the nominee or the presumptive nominee goes through this process, he takes a few knocks, and he becomes better, and he learns how to better appeal to parts of perhaps the base of the party that he struggled to appeal to. Mitt Romney has not been able to do it. Republicans have been waiting for Romney to be able to lock up some, you know, not that he's going to lock up evangelical voters, but that he's going to be able to find a way to appeal to more conservatives throughout this process and sort of ease the minds of some higher-ups in the GOP that conservatives are going to be excited about him in November. And there's still a huge concern there. So
you got about 70% of the Republican electorate still doesn't want him, this anybody but Mitt movement. Is it overstated or underrated?
It's a hard question. I mean, I think that it's a bit overstated when you hear it out of the mouth of Newt Gingrich or Rick Santorum. This idea that, you know, Rick Santorum says if Newt Gingrich is out of this race, all of a sudden he's, you know, beating Romney hands down. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's much more nuanced than that. I don't think that the combined Gingrich-Santorum vote is automatically all anti-Romney. I think what Romney's benefiting from here is the fact that he's got challengers who can't really raise a heck of a lot of money themselves, have not shown the ability to have any semblance of the organization that Mitt Romney does. You know, you look at Rick Santorum did really well in Ohio, but he missed out on lots of delegates in all these counties because organizationally his campaign couldn't even get delegate slates filed in some of these counties, which is a disaster.
Well, that's the point that somebody made a week or so ago, that this guy can't beat. Right. Somebody who was humiliated, forced to leave Congress, and has at best lived a checkered life, and somebody whose organization is so weak that they couldn't even succeed in filing for delegates. I mean, right. the point is not so much that Romney is in a close contest, but that he's a close contest with 2 guys who shouldn't even be in the contest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's a million reasons why this should not have gone on this long. There's a million reasons why Mitt Romney should have been able to dispense with Newt Gingrich and Rick Santorum by now. And that raises the questions of why can't Mitt Romney shake these guys? And if he can't shake these guys, what kind of candidate is he going to be against Barack Obama? Because for all you want to say about Barack Obama, look where his approval rating is, look where the economy is. You know, Barack Obama and the Democratic Party has been building what will be a superior campaign operation, on the ground, grassroots operation, very data-driven, unlike I think anything we'll have ever seen in presidential politics. That's a hard thing to compete against, no matter where his approval numbers are.
Mitt Romney says he has the numbers. He's got the delegates, and they suggest from the campaign that they're following the Obama model, which right. is not paying attention to the day-to-day, but focused on delegate selection. AP seems to agree, and they give a count that has him well more than 1/2 of the delegates right. that are chosen to date. All he needs is half, and the elections coming up are the ones that are going to be winner take all, and that right. could actually clinch it for him, especially California, New York, ones he's expected to win. Right. But Santorum and Gingrich say that it's a more complicated picture, and actually knowing that process as I do, many of these delegates that they're putting in a camp or another camp are not really decided. Right. Iowa hasn't been decided yet. They're still in the county caucuses. Many of these states are still going through the process, and many of them are uncommitted right. and make their decision later on. So he really doesn't have the numbers yet, does he?
No, he absolutely doesn't, and that's where the glimmer of hope is. You know, I mean, as you suggest, there are many stages to this process in a lot of states, Iowa being one, where you know there's local, there's county conventions, and then you know, I mean, before you lock in delegates,
Iowa votes first,
right,
but chooses their delegates last.
Right.
They go to a county convention, then a congressional district convention,
right,
then they go to the state convention sometime in June.
Right.
So this is a long way from this being over.
Yeah, and this is the hope for you know, Rick Santorum and Newt Gingrich, and you know, Ron Paul is still in the mix to the extent that if there is some sort of you know brokered convention, the amount of delegates he manages to amass through the summer could possibly you know, be a kingmaker some way somehow. So yeah, I mean, there's a million different ways you can slice this delegate math, and the bottom line is right now, there's no reason to believe Mitt Romney's not going to be able to clinch this thing before the convention, but Rick Santorum and Newt Gingrich have delegate counters who see plenty of ways that he might not be able to, so they're still around.
I want to shift gears on the same topic of the Romney or whoever wins by asking the question this way. Ever since I've been in politics, we've always been told that these elections are won in the center. And the assumption was that Romney would be the better candidate because he could always feint back to the center, whereas Santorum will have a hell of a time doing that, as will Gingrich or any of the others who were in the field before. But is he progressively weakened by the fact that the longer this goes on and the harder right he tacks, that he, not only he, but that the party itself has a problem getting back to the center?
Yeah, I think there's a very strong argument to be made there, and it's not just...
The rhetoric's gotten awful harsh here.
Yeah, and in some sense, look at who his opponents are. Look at the places where he's competing. You know, if Mitt Romney's going to try to go down to Alabama and Mississippi and Louisiana and compete among conservative voters there, those are the sorts of things he's got to talk about. That's where the rhetoric, in some senses, has to go, because you'll listen to the things that Rick Santorum is saying on the stump. You know, but the other point I would make in terms of length of time is it's not just, you know, where the debate goes and what the rhetoric sounds like. It's you look at Mitt Romney and you look at what he's going to face in terms of a cash machine versus Barack Obama in the fall. Mitt Romney's campaign is burning money at a rate that they would much prefer not to be at this point, particularly on two folks, Newt Gingrich and Rick Santorum. They don't want to be spending their money in all these states through June and against these two guys. They want to be collecting it, and they want to make sure that they're in a good financial position for the fall. There's some questions about that right now because of the burn rate.
Now, I'm old, but my memory is fading. You're young, but a student of politics. Is this an exceptionally harsh primary? Or, in other words, when it's over, they all come together and say, we're all with the guy who won. We're with it's the Me Too party. I somehow have difficulty seeing Newt Gingrich up there on the stage saying, I'm with the guy who won. And as I'm looking at the polls and I'm seeing a significant number of Republicans saying, I can't vote for this guy, of all the three candidates. Is there a problem that this has been a harsher than normal campaign, or have we seen this before in the same nasty way? Democrats do it,
right,
and pay the price for it. The Kennedy-Carter one,
right, was
one that Carter never recovered from.
Right.
But I wonder about this on the Republican side. Is this new?
You know, I think that some of this is a little bit overblown in terms of where's the unity going to be. I agree with you absolutely when you say you can't quite see Newt Gingrich standing shoulder to shoulder with Mitt Romney at the end of this and stumping for him. I don't think Mitt Romney would even want it. I agree there. Same thing with Rick Santorum. I can't see sort of a unity rally with all these three. However, I think it's a different question with the voters. I go back to 2008. I remember I was at the speech where Senator Clinton dropped out of the race against Barack Obama. Talked to a lot of voters there, a lot of Hillary Clinton supporters. There were some, to a person, there were people saying, I just don't know if I can support Barack Obama. They were so upset by the freshness of what became a pretty bitter primary. You fast forward to the fall against John McCain in 2008. There was an enormous amount of Democratic unity behind Barack Obama. I'm less concerned about that. And I think what happens with Newt Gingrich and what happens with Rick Santorum and Mitt Romney interpersonally, I think is a lot different than where the Republican electorate is come the fall. I think they're going to be fairly united against Barack Obama.
I asked this because it's always been said Democrats fall in love with the guy who wins and Republicans fall in line.
Right.
And so it didn't surprise me that at the convention, I mean, people fell in love with John Kerry, and difficult as it was to imagine, he became charismatic almost at the convention. Republicans, I just don't recall, and that's what I'm having trouble with, ever having gone through that same kind of bloodbath. The Democrats are the ones who usually go through.
Right.
And so I don't know if they know how to fall in love. It's an ideological movement right now. The Obama-Hillary one was over qualities of leadership and experience. And this one is over, I'm a conservative, he's not. I have the philosophy of Ronald Reagan, he doesn't. He's betrayed our values. That's the one that I think is a tough one to get over.
Well, I think where this becomes a different question is this, and it's a far-fetched possibility at this point, but this idea of a brokered convention. I think that for folks who are political junkies or reporters or anybody in the process for that matter, sort of thinks of the idea of a brokered convention as, oh wow, how incredible that would be to watch that unfold. And I mean, these are the history of convention fights. I mean, these are affairs that rip parties apart. I mean, I don't know that folks are talking enough about the possibility that if this does go to a convention, the potential long-term damage that gets done when there's all of a sudden a floor fight. I mean, I think you mentioned Carter and Kennedy in '80. I mean, that in some ways came very close to ripping the party apart. Yeah. It's a very bitter and vicious fight when you get to the floor of a convention.
I'm looking at the exit polls. The Alabama and Mississippi one. 80 to 83% were evangelical Christians of those who voted on the Republican side. National Journal had done a study a while back looking at the exit polls. 70% were, 90% about were white of the voters, and about 70% basically were white old men born again. I mean, it's a type, a demographic here, not a winning coalition.
No.
Can the Republicans move from a primary where that's been the folks who voted to a general where they bring women in, bring some minorities in, bring folks in who they didn't attract in the primary process?
And again, the whole rationale here for Mitt Romney, or has been traditionally, is that, the hierarchy of the Republican Party, the top strategist folks who, ran George Bush's campaigns, see Mitt Romney as the only person in the field who could potentially do that. But back to your question earlier about, is the rhetoric in this primary fight sort of hurting that? You saw some coverage over the last couple of days about Mitt Romney's Latino problem and areas where you were going to have Florida, for example, swing states where the Latino vote is going to be huge. And you go back to 2004, George Bush won 40%. I mean, that's an enormous demographic that Republicans can't continue to ignore, can't continue to think that they could sort of talk about immigration with the same rhetoric and talk about it in the same way they have been, and think that on the other hand they can just turn around and appeal to Latino voters the next day. It's not going to happen. And I don't think this primary process has helped that in any way, shape, or form. I think the primary process has actually sort of moved the party, and Mitt Romney in particular, away from talking to the center, as you were suggesting before, talking to women, talking to Latinos. We haven't seen it.
And there are those who suggest that as Republicans move to the right, that Obama has picked up a campaign approach focusing on the issues that have appealed to the left of the party. Right. And is there a center left?
I think that what you've seen from the president over the past couple of weeks, what you've seen in the White House really over the past couple of months, not only on the fundraising side, how they've tried to take the Rush Limbaugh instance. Yeah. Democratic Party's raised a lot of money off of that. They traditionally do. We see those base fundraising appeals. You've seen a lot of appeals to the Democratic base from Barack Obama and from the Obama camp in the last couple of weeks. I think that's going to continue. They see that opening there, that if they can really solidify and re-energize the Democratic base, who, if you remember 6 months ago, I think I was on your show at some point in the not too distant future talking about the sort of a dissatisfaction among the liberal base of the party with the president in the White House. They see a real opening right now to make that go away and to bring back that energy.
Now, with all this playing out, the president's favorable ratings are still low and apparently dropping. And in the last couple of polls that I saw, he's tied with Romney, beating Santorum by about 3 or 4 points only. Right. What's this mean? I mean, it's as bad as it gets on the one side. It hasn't helped Obama in terms of the national perception. This, one would think, watching this self-destruction on the Republican side, that he's a shoo-in, but it's a close election no matter how you cut it. Yeah,
and I think if you go back to the two core numbers, you look at the president's approval rating and you look at the unemployment rate. If the unemployment rate in November of 2000, election day later this year, is what it is today, and Barack Obama manages to win re-election, far and away he will be the incumbent president the only incumbent president who's won re-election with an unemployment rate anywhere near the percentage we're at right now. That cuts against him so strongly, and so does his approval numbers. When you look back historically, incumbent presidents with numbers near where his are have lost, and they've lost pretty big. So there's a huge hurdle there, and I think that's why you see so many muddled polls, why you're going to see this so close.
One last question, Ron Paul. Is he underperforming?
You know, he's been underperforming, I think, since the start of the primary process. I mean, go back to New Hampshire. We all thought he was going to do much better in New Hampshire than his eventual finish there suggested. There were a number of states throughout the way, some caucuses that we thought he was going to win, and he ended up close second. So in some sense, he is underperforming. But to the extent that he amasses some delegates, anything can happen. Remember, Ron Paul's not running to be the nominee. Ron Paul's running to get his issues out there and his brand of libertarianism in front of the cameras. He's doing a darn good job, I think.
Shane, thank you so much for joining us. This is a topic I could talk about all night.
Thanks, Jim.
That's all the time we've got. For more information on this and other topics, follow us on Twitter at AAIUSA or log on to the website for the polling data and the positions of the candidates that I mentioned, aaiusa.org. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week on Viewpoint.